Welcome to our first installment of Native Gardening 101, where we're going to focus on California native plant selection. And we are joining this talk with Jennifer de Graaf, who's a landscape architect and educator. And we're going to just be talking about diving deeper into selection of the right native plants for your location, which is probably one of the most important steps in creating a long-lasting, successful garden. And just some logistics as we move forward in the talk. Feel free to use the Q&A option in the Zoom webinar if you have a specific question, and we will be answering it as the webinar proceeds. And then also feel free to use the chat function if you want to chat or like talk amongst yourselves and just ask for advice while the webinar is going. So I am Maya Argamon. I am the CNPS Horticulture Programs Coordinator. And Anne-Marie, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
I'm Anne-Marie Benz. I'm the California Plant Society's Horticulture Programs Manager. And we are here with...
We're here with Jennifer de Graaf, and she is a wonderful landscape architect and educator with experience spanning over 20 years. She's developed and taught courses at the UC Berkeley Extension and the Landscape Architecture Certification Program. And she is a licensed landscape architect in California, a LEED accredited professional, a Rescape qualified professional, a Rescape rater, and a qualified water efficient landscaper. And I can go into more of her qualifications and all of that, but just have her take the floor and talk about native plant selection.
Okay.
Oh, we're actually going to talk, before we dive into that, we're going to talk about cowscape, and Anne-Marie is going to go into that.
Right. Well, thanks, Maya. Listening to Jen's intro, I think she is trying to collect all of the letters in the alphabet behind her name.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And this is a big topic, you know, how to select plants, and particularly California native plants. California is a big place. We've got a lot of different things going on. So how do you find ones that are right for you? If you haven't found cowscape, cowscape is a really good filter to get started in this journey. If you have found cowscape, you still might not know about how to use it in a way that'll help narrow it down to what you're looking for. So I'm going to do just a real quick intro on how to look at cowscape, because when you bring it up, terrific resources, but there are 7,988 plants in here. For me, that's a little bit like the peanut butter aisle at the grocery store. It just means there are way too many options, and trying to narrow it down on my own is a little bit overwhelming. But if I want to narrow it down, if I want to go into and find really what I want, we're going to go to do an advanced search. So beyond California, if you want to find your location, you can even go down as far as putting in your exact address, or you can put in your city, you can put in, you know, California if you're going for the whole thing. I'm going to go with our Sacramento here, because that's our kind of home base of the state for CNPS. And let's say I want annual and perennial herbs. I want some shrubs. I'd like succulents. And I need them to be, Sacramento's pretty sunny, so we're going to go with full and part sun. You can put in your drainage requirements, which would kind of bring you back to your type of soil. Water requirements, we're going to go with extremely low or very low. We're in a drought. Historically, California is in a drought about a third of the time. It's getting more often. It's getting more extreme. We want to be really cautious of that. I'm going to look at ease of care, and I'm going to pretend I would do something that's moderately easy, but the reality is I'm not going to take care of things much. This is one of those instances of a cobbler's children have no shoes. I work in plants, therefore my plants are a little neglected at home at the moment, but I want all the happy stuff. I want a bee garden. I want bird gardens. I want butterflies. I want butterfly friendly. I want hummingbirds. So there's a lot of different things you can choose here. You can choose if they're commonly available, if you have a favorite nursery. If not, we'll help you to fall in love with your new favorite nursery. You can have if they're fragrant, what color you have. Are you doing only, pink flowers in your garden? Do you need a variety of colors? What flowering seasons do you want? How high do you want them to be? The genus. But it gives you a filter. It's a way to create your own list. So you can go ahead, you can search. It narrows down that multiple thousand to 18 plants. And it can give you a lot of information about each plant then. We'll go with the California poppy, our state flower, our state native plant here. And it shows you where it's native to begin with, which is nearly, but not quite everywhere. Gives you a bunch of different views of what this flower can look like. You can find out all about the flower, what it's going to grow up to be. When does it flower? What color are you going to get? How big is it going to get? What wildlife is supported by it? Give you a chance to really look at your pollinators some with the butterflies and moths. If you're really butterfly and moth friendly and pollinator friendly, you really want to go with oaks, but that's a side note. If they're appropriate. Landscaping information, how do you care for this? What else is it called? What are great companion plants for it? And then you can even go down and you can print plant signs, you can print plant labels. And if you're signed in, you can add it to a plant list, which is, Jennifer's going to talk about how plant lists are kind of a good starter place for really digging in. You can also go and find out what nurseries carry it. So you can go in, we were in Sacramento, you want to find a couple of different nurseries right around you that carry it, give you an opportunity to fall in love with a new native plant nursery. You can go to their page. It will give you all the information on where they are. You can see what else they're carrying at the moment. So it's a good way, cowscape is a good way to start a list for your area and to find who carries native plants in your space. So I'm going to stop share and we're going to let Jennifer go into a little more detail for all of you.
Oops.
That was nice.
Okay. Let me do this. Whoops, hang on. Okay, my turn. Got it. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Okay, so yeah, she's right about the thing with the plant list. I'll get to that at the end. I saw a couple of the questions before I went full screen, and I have every confidence that Anne-Marie and Maya will collect those questions, and I will do my very, very best to leave as much space at the end for them as I possibly can. So let's go. So what's the point or the goal when we're picking plants for a yard, landscape, a business, whatever ground or pot you're trying to put it into? What's the point? Are we trying to increase the value of a home or grow a specific kind of item like tomatoes because we want to eat really great tomatoes, or do we want flowers, so we're going to try to grow flowers? Are we doing it for our health, or for something to do, or just to be pretty and have something nice to look at? And you guys, trick question. It's so that our plants will be healthy. Sorry about that. None of these things is possible. None of them, if your plants are healthy. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to reduce stress. It's not going to grow squat. And it's not going to increase any value or look good if it's not healthy. So that is how you pick plants, based on whether or not they're going to like what you have to dish out. So let's talk about that. The beauty of the plants is dependent on their health. Any return on your investment, and nursery plants are freaking expensive, you guys. I have been out into the retail nurseries more recently than in the last year or so, and prices have gone way the heck up. There is no amount of great design or maintenance or effort that you can put in to making a plant like your space, your maintenance, your water delivery, your soil. If it doesn't like it, it's not going to negotiate. Mother Nature does not negotiate. These plants want what they want, and you can either provide it or not. You cannot overcome their poor health if they're not happy. So we're going to talk about that kind of approach. What do the plants need that you're interested in, and figuring out if that's going to work for you. So we want to talk about things like sun exposure and how much water they need, how big do they get, and how much space do you have to give them. We want to talk about plant communities like this lovely photo from Mill Valley. We want to avoid plants that are invasive. That's the antithesis. That's like the opposite of planting natives, is planting the plants that are invasive, which means that they disturb the natural ecosystem where they are, and they disrupt those native plant communities from being healthful as communities. So that's no good. We want to talk about soil health, except I won't have time to go into soil health, but I hope that you will all remember the term soil health and not just, oh, I need fertilizers, or oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. No, 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 no. You need to foster the health of the soil, which is a completely different topic. And hopefully we'll get to talk about that someday. And you want to know if they're available. I mean, there's no good finding a plant that you love if you can't buy it, if it's sold out, or if the crop has failed for the year and a nursery can't carry it because it's not available at the grower level, or maybe they're not locally available to you because they're not really appropriate for where you are. All of these things can happen, so you want to be looking at all of that. So let's get into it. Sun exposure is actually, it has technical parameters that go with it. So it's not just, you don't have to guess. You can observe over the course of a year in shade, this area gets less than 4 hours of direct sunlight. And by direct sunlight, I mean the space between the sun and that plant is not broken up by another tree or an awning or any other buildings. It's not disrupted. The light can get directly from the sun to that place. So shade is less than 4 hours of direct sunlight. Partial shade is about 4 to 6, and mostly in the morning, because there's a difference between morning sun, midday sun, and afternoon sun. Partial sun is considered to be 4 to 6 hours of that direct sunlight, including some in the evening. And full sun is just 6 hours or more, go for it, full blast. Now the time of day, morning sun, this is a generalization, and generalizations are unfair to specifics, right? So if I'm talking about specific plant, this is being unfair to that plant. You need to know about that plant. But generally speaking, for the most part, morning sun is gentler, the day is cooler, it's a little bit less insane and intense, it's low in the sky. Of course, it changes, right? So noon sun, the harshest. Now, a plant that can take morning sun and afternoon sun may be different from a plant that can tolerate the insanity of direct overhead blast, full bore sunlight, which is it's the most warming up, it's the hottest, it's the brightest. And it has a tendency, if you have a plant that only gets midday sun but is sheltered the rest of the time, that's kind of difficult for a lot of plants. So if you have that sort of condition, I would err on the side of going towards the full sun and the partial sun, and don't think that only because it gets like the midday sun but it's only 3 hours that you can just consider that shade. I wouldn't do that. So I hope that tracks. And then afternoon sun, yeah, the sun is going down, but the day has already warmed up and has yet to start cooling off unless a breeze is kicked up where you live, which would be helpful. So hopefully that demystifies what those mean. Now, hydrozoning is the technical term that landscape professionals use to talk about putting plants with the same water needs together so that when you water a space, they all get the right amount, they all get the same amount, and they're all happy with that. So that usually has a relationship to your irrigation system. So you should, if you have an irrigation system, I don't, I hand water, but if you have a system where you have one area is on one valve and another area is on another valve, all of the plants in those areas should have the same or similar water needs to each other, so that when that valve goes on and that amount of water is dispensed, all of the plants in that area are happy. Now, drought tolerance is a buzzword that I despise. I hate this word. It has no relationship to water needs, none, zero. It is a type of drought response. Now, plants respond to stress in different ways, just like we all respond to stress in different ways. Some of us are better at some kinds of stress. Some of us are better at other kinds of stress. Drought tolerance is only a kind of a response to drought as the stress event. So if you have a plant that's drought tolerant and you have a major heat wave and there hasn't been any natural rainfall and it kind of puts up with it, it's drought tolerant. It's tolerating it. So it's not a technical term in that it doesn't have anything to do with that plant's need for water. And it also does not guarantee that that plant's going to look good. It could look like garbage during that stress event, but if it tolerates it, then it's drought tolerant. Okay, so it really kind of means that it just doesn't die in mild to moderate stress events. And so when you're mixing and matching, oh, I got to get to this. Hang on. I should have deleted that line. When you're mixing and matching and trying to figure out what plants go together, what plants have similar water needs, go to WUCALS. Now, WUCALS stands for Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. That just means water needs for plants. Don't let the language catch you up. It's quantifiable from WUCALS. It is regional and relatively specific. It is California only. It is an ever-evolving database. I became aware of it first in 2009. I think that's when they started it, but I'm not positive if I'm misremembering. It is used by professionals and referenced in state law for water budgeting. That's called MWILO, and I won't get into that. But this is the main reference I use to gather plants together by their need for water. And it is also, just like cowscape, searchable. You can export lists, you can do all kinds of wonderful things. And if you look on this image here, the user manual right under the word homepage, that's where you go for instructions. There's instructions for how to search it. It's got all kinds of wonderful background material. So this is managed by UC Davis. They've got all their stuff is explained in there. And so just Google WUCALS and you'll find it. What you can do, you can search two different ways. So you can search, I circled the part where you can pull down and find your local, the city you live in or the one that's closest to you. It probably doesn't have every single city. So you can search that way and start from there. You can also search on that very same page by what kind of plant type you have. Now, I want you to see down here, kind of in the middle lower part of the screen where it says very low, low, moderate, medium, high, unknown, and not appropriate. I don't know if y'all remember, but when Anne Marie was looking at cowscape, the water needs terms that she was clicking on were the same words, very low, low, moderate, and high. These words have become calculatable because of this website. In this website, those words are technical terms that reference a whole bunch of math that you don't have to worry about. So we're not going to go there. But those words from WUCALS are technical terms. Those words from other organizations, like looking it up in a book or a magazine, are not technical terms and are not connected to math. So here, if you're looking at, there's a place in this website where you can see all of the needs. You can see this tree poppy. I don't know this plant at all, but I circled it because in the 6 regions in California that they have entered data for, this plant has different needs. It has moderate, moderate, and moderate, but in some areas it's inappropriate. They don't say why, they just say inappropriate. And in other spaces, they don't know. You can see in some plants that There'll be moderate water needs in one area, but more high in another, or lower in a third zone. So these columns here in this chart are related to those cities, which are grouped into 6 different regions. And so you want to make sure that as you're looking at this, you're using plants together that have the same term. So very low and low could be grouped together, and that's legal. Now the actual state of California in the water efficient landscape ordinance outlaws doing anything broader than this. So you can group plants that have very low and low needs together, low and moderate needs together, or moderate and high, but you cannot do very low and moderate in the same zone. That's not allowed. Now, you guys, if you're not landscape professionals and you're just doing this in your own yard, the water police aren't going to come get you. But they'll come get me. But here's what happens if let's take that very first one. You have a plant that takes very low water and can thrive and be healthy on very low water. And you plant it in a space where it gets the same water dished out to it as a plant with moderate needs. Now, one of those plants is going to be unhappy. Either the very low plant is going to get too much water, or the moderate water plant is going to get too little. And one or the other of those is going to be stressed out. So we don't want that. We want to keep their needs as close together, preferably in the same category. But if you feel like, oh God, I must have this plant, then you might be able to stretch the envelope to the next level of water need. Okay, so spacing. I know I'm going fast, right? I only have so much time. I want to get to a whole bunch of stuff. When you space your plants out, let's say you've already picked a bunch and you want to put them out there, they should have been selected so that they fit, so that they are not going to outgrow the space, so that they're going to be able to fill the space, but not end up getting sheared or clipped just because they're in your way. That's wasteful, and it's just adding green waste to the landfill or to your composting partners or whatever. But it's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources. And I want to talk about this because it's super important. If you plan for the plants to be the ones you select are the right size for the space that you have to offer, you're going to save energy and maintain them less. You have to go out and clip them less. They look like crap less, and it reduces all that waste. So spacing, here's my little technical diagram. Let's say you have plants, and I didn't put numbers on this because it's not about a number that's airy-fairy and made up. It's about the number for that plant. So let's say I have a plant that grows to be 3 feet wide at maturity, not 3 feet wide tomorrow, 3 feet wide when it's fully grown in. That would be your basic spacing. You should have those plants 3 feet apart, right? So that each one of them has room to grow up to be its big, beautiful, wonderful 3-foot self. If you're planting it next to paving or some other object, it should be at least that radius away from the next thing. So that would be 18 inches away. Now, what I do as a landscape professional is I assume that my plants aren't going to make it to full, perfect, wonderful, most amazing, most impressive size. I assume they're going to get 75% of the way there. And so my spacing is just slightly tighter because most of the time it takes them, if they're purported to reach 3 feet, most of the time they don't quite get there. I've had some plants that exceed that. You know, the numbers that the growers and the developers put in their descriptions are kind of guesswork because some plants just grow better in some parts of the country than in others. And a lot of these growers and developers are marketing their plants for big, big regions. And so they just kind of come up with a number. So your observations are going to really hold sway over this, but 75% of what the grower says it should be is pretty much a great starting point. The challenge is when you buy it, it's this little bitty dude. It comes in a little pot, maybe 1 gallon or 5 gallon or 4 inch. And it's not its full mature size. So you have to remember to actually keep it at that spacing, knowing that it's going to grow in. And that is hard for all of us. I have a tendency to go out and be like, well, this looks cute here, this looks cute here, and I dig holes and then they all grow into each other, and I know better. I catch landscape contractors trying to squish things together all the time. It's better for your plant to have the room to grow into its most beautiful self. Spacing, let's say you have a 3-foot shrub or a 3-foot whatever, and you're trying to put it next to something that's going to get half that size. You want it to be so that the space between the 3-foot thing and the 18-inch thing is both of those radiuses added together. So the 18 inches from 3 feet and the 9 inches from the 18-inch size plant is 2 foot 3 inches. So that kind of thing will help you give them exactly the space that they need to grow in nice and pretty. Okay, plant communities. This is huge when you're looking for native plants. Like Anne-Marie said, California is a big freaking place, and the plants that grow here are as diverse as the people, okay? So if I'm planting a garden in Sacramento, I should probably be looking for plants that are actually from Sacramento, not just California native, Sacramento native. And so I love that they allow you, or they have the feature where you can enter your address and it helps you whittle that down. It helps you narrow it down to things that they have seen occurring and doing well really, really close to you. And so I think that's huge. And also, as Anne-Marie pointed out, they've got other information on bugs and butterflies and all the other plants that are connected in that similar plant community. I use this in conjunction with the Las Palitas, which is just a native plant nursery. They're not sponsoring anything or anything like that, but they've put a lot of work into this zip code tool. And so if you just go to their nursery and enter zip code in their search box, you'll probably find it. But they have additional information. I cross-reference the two of them all the time. And let's say you enter 94557, which is a zip code in Hayward, or look at that, Napa has several. Then they'll spit back that Hayward typically is coastal sage scrub. Now, coastal sage scrub doesn't care if it stepped a toe over the line from Hayward into San Leandro, but you'll be able to narrow those things down, get a little bit more information, cross-reference them, flesh out the information, and I just absolutely freaking love it. So this is super, super helpful. And on that note, I want to point out that when you're doing these searches, the very best thing you can do is use the scientific name. Common names are, they are often used because someone found it easier to say. In the landscape industry as a professional, I only use common names if I also use the scientific names. So my plant list has both, but I never, never, never use a common name by itself. It is just too easy to get confused. Some plants have multiple common names. Many different plants will share a common name. Cowscape and your local specialty nurseries, they're the best place for you to go and get like specific information on this species over like just local generic nurseries. Like I wouldn't go asking questions of the people at Home Depot just because they have some plants outside. They're not going to be able to give you as good of information as the people who are focused on natives and local to you. So I would use Cowscape to find local nurseries that have native plants and go talk to them, or local nurseries better that specialize in native plants and talk to them. So here's a great example. Skynus mole is a tree that I often have heard called California pepper. It's not from California pepper. So you can't use that common name and make the assumption that that means anything, because it doesn't. It's from freaking Peru. So start getting comfortable with the scientific names and cultivar names and let's leave behind the common names and stop confusing everybody. Okay, so invasives, that's a great next step. Plantright.org is a nonprofit that actually, I think they're based in San Francisco. Their whole goal is to discourage invasive plants from being in the nursery trade. CalIPSI, or Invasive Plant Council, they have a much more extensive list and more of a living database that's constantly being added to. Their focus is bigger scale. How is this plant disrupting rangelands and natural wildlands in California, and what should we do about it? So they're not so focused on the nurseries, but you can get some really great information there. And again, invasive plants are known to disrupt the natural plant community that we're trying to foster and develop and help mimic as people. So that's that. One of my next points about that is Mexican feathergrass. Look at me with the common name, Nacella tenuissima, is absolutely an invasive here in California. It does not belong here in California. It is nasty as hell, and it's not illegal to sell. It's also popular. So a lot of people go out and buy this. My next door neighbor, that guy right there, he's got a bunch of it. And I'm always pulling these things out of my yard because I'm not going to plant an invasive, and I'm not going to let one take hold in my garden. But it doesn't make it illegal for him to grow it. So that's something that we got to be careful of. The nurseries are not necessarily safe places to avoid invasives unless they've, said something that they will never carry it or something like that. And since these are popular and they make a lot of money, they're probably going to be available. Plantright.org has, in order to encourage people not to buy those invasives at the nurseries, they will suggest alternatives. They don't have an extensive database for this kind of thing, but it's a really great example of how you could do that yourself. Like if you were looking for a plant that turns out to be invasive, but you want to grow something similar, here's your inspiration right here. You can't necessarily get something that looks exactly the same, but you can absolutely, there's so many plants out there, you can absolutely find something that looks close enough. Sourcing and availability is challenging. The retail nurseries love to sell things that look pretty right now, which is different from the things that look pretty next month and 3 months after that. So if you're trying to grow a plant community in your landscape space and you want that year-round entertainment, the flowers and the beautiful fall color or beautiful spring color or whatever it is, and you want to foster a wide variety of birds and bugs and all kinds of wonderful wildlife, then you're going to have to be buying plants if you're in the retail trade, and even to some extent at the wholesale level, over time. You're going to be phasing them in over time because especially in the retail trade, they like to sell things that look good. And if it's out of season and it just doesn't look super fabulous, it doesn't sell well. And their goal is to sell things. So totally down with that, but we need to know what to do about that. And here's my thing about plant lists. They are an absolutely wonderful place to start. Databases are better. Like Cowscape is an actual database, you're already searching it. But if someone puts out a plant list, where's that for? Like if my local nursery says, these are plants that are great under California oaks, that might be a very different list than if I go down to Los Angeles and find a nursery that's going to give me a list that's similar, but neither of those lists knows squat about my yard. Neither of them knows anything about my soil or what kind of water I have or what kind of sun exposure I have. All of those things need to go into you doing that homework, so that you can whittle down the choices, which is great because then you can focus on which ones you like once you find out which ones might work, and you waste a lot less money playing, plant roulette. And those homework assignments are a wonderful place to start, especially if you're just like, holy crap, there's 3 freaking million plants out there and I don't know what to do. Plant lists are a wonderful place to start. Cross-reference them with cowscape and other local California native plant nurseries, other lists, other books, all that stuff, and then start crossing off the ones that seem like they're not going to work. And you can totally whittle this down. It's really, you now, after hearing me spew all this stuff, you have the means to start figuring out which plants go where and separating them out by their water needs and their light needs and all of those things. So here's a couple of resources that I find useful. I'm in Northern California. There might be something more local to you, like that East Bay Mud is my local water utility. Cowscape is statewide. Pacific Horticulture Magazine, also statewide. Designing Native California Plants has a plant community approach, and I think it's a wonderful book. So those are some of the ones in my arsenal, and that will help you create a sense of place and have the plants that you buy have a better chance at being more successful in your garden so that you don't end up with unhappy, sick, stressed out little weirdos. And that's pretty much my spiel. So hopefully we have enough time for some questions.
Actually, you went really quick, so we do.
I went quick on purpose. You guys can rewatch this. But I want to get to the questions. Let's go. Okay.
So first off, can you show the second to last slide again? The one with the resources and the books.
Yeah.
Can we leave that up for a second? Because
yeah.
we've got a couple of people looking for that.
People are like, I want to write it down.
I know.
Yeah.
We are the weird, stressed out little ones now that you were just
I just ruined it.
Well, we were monitoring questions. Everybody's talking among themselves and giving resources and support over there as well, which is great because we obviously have a lot of knowledge in this group.
Of course.
Some of the questions that we got aren't going to be a surprise. We are in deep drought and we've just gone into fire season.
Yes.
So one of the things that Jen used to teach is firescaping.
Oh, I still do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't want to throw you entirely under the bus.
I am under the bus. That's okay. I live here.
One of the ways I've looked at it is fire is part of our natural thing. It's a lot worse because of all the different factors and such right now. But I've often taken these lists and layered them with Las Politas burn list.
Right.
Do you feel up to talking about that for a moment?
Yeah. So Las Politas is a nerdy little nursery. And someone there a few years ago ran around the nursery, and they have an old barn somewhere. I haven't been there. I want to go. But they have an old barn, and someone there ran around and took cuttings. They're only native California plants that they grow. So these were all plants that they tried out, and they would cut a fresh piece of something, run into the barn where there's no wind, and light it with a butane torch and time how long it took the flame of that torch to ignite the piece of plant material they had. So this is plant material that isn't dried out. It's well watered in that it's watered appropriately for being in a pot in a nursery. It's not dehydrated. It's not any of these things. And they recorded how long it took for those leaves, stems, whatever they grabbed to ignite. And then they recorded it and put it on their website. The thing that I noticed when I started looking at that website in depth, and they've got a whole bunch of wonderful information in there. Those guys are like incredible at website building. The thing I noticed is that most of these plants will ignite if they're next to a flame within a minute. So a good number for a plant is a minute. So my thing is, like, they're starting with exactly what they should be, which is healthy plant material that's not drought stressed. It's not any of these things that make our plants more vulnerable. and stressed out, just like when we're stressed out, we're more vulnerable to disease. And if we're dehydrated, that's not good. Plants are more flammable if they're stressed out or dehydrated or all of those things. And so they checked that for all of the plants that they tested. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good starter place. We don't want to go entirely just into fire with this because it would be really easy for that.
Oh, we can't go into fire.
That's its own talk. That deserves
a couple of hours. It deserves a few hours.
Or a few days at least. Can you explain plant zones? What are they? Where do you find them?
The hardiness zones? I'm assuming we mean the hardiness zones. There's two systems of hardiness zones. There's actually a third one that I'm not even going to get into. So there's the USDA plant hardiness zone that is based only on cold temperature tolerance. Then there is like the sunset plant zones, and that is way more granular, and it goes down into in some areas like exposure and the east side of a hill versus the west side of a hill and stuff like that. And so it's way more regional, way more specific, and it's based on a lot more information than the USDA plant hardiness, which here where I live, we very rarely get super cold. So knowing how much cold a plant can take, not really my bag. If I was in a place where cold and frost was more of an issue, then I would be probably using both. But yeah, the USDA one is too general and too broad. There's another one that someone tried to start up. I think it was around heat tolerance, but I almost never see them pop up.
Great.
Yeah.
That one. How about for establishing a native meadow? If somebody wanted to do a meadow, have you ever done meadows?
Yes, I have an excellent book on it by, garbage. It's called The New American Meadow, and it's by, what's his face? Greenlee, I think.
John Greenlee?
Yeah.
The Meadow Man.
I think it's Greenlee.
John Greenlee.
It should be like right next to me.
Well, John Greenlee is.
It is.
He is the Meadow Man.
It's the American Meadow Garden. So Google that, Amazon that. Excellent reading. It's one of the few plant books I've actually read all of the words in. Most of them I look stuff up. The American Meadow Garden I've actually read cover to cover. Yeah, that guy is wonderful.
All right, and we've had a couple of questions on this now. The best way to remove lawn before putting in native plants.
Okay.
And I'm going to still go with, you're laughing at me. We've done this.
I am.
Oh, it's going to need a lot of cardboard is the answer.
Yeah.
Sheet mulching is the best way.
Yes.
To remove lawn.
Yes.
And there are a lot of different resources on it, depending on where you're at. But basically, it's taking a lasagna of cardboard, compost, water, and topping it off with mulch.
Yeah.
You are feeding the soil, starving the grass of what it needs, and it gets you ready fairly quick to be ready to replant.
Right. So here's what Emery's talking about is instead of removing the grass, which to some people means scooping it all up and hauling it away, let's cover it so that it can't get the light it needs and literally starve it to death, and then use it as organic material in our garden. Don't remove it, just kill it, but not with chemicals, with wonderful things like cardboard, compost, and mulch. And sheet mulching is the term for that. Google that. If you can't find it, holler. And it should be fairly easy to find information on, especially if you look at Stop Waste. They're one of our local waste management organizations, and they put out information on sheet mulching. I was in Southern California 3 weeks ago and could not find materials, so I'm looking for that. It seems that Southern California doesn't do this as much as we do up here, but they totally need to. And yeah, that's what we're talking about. So don't remove it, just kill it in place and then let it become part of your new garden.
And you can remove things eventually like Bermuda grass or ivy with it. I've done ivy.
Yeah.
It does take more time and it takes more work, and it takes doing it over and over for a while to get rid of it. But it's still at least, if not more effective than digging it out usually is, because I've also dug out ivy by hand over and over for years. It's a lot.
I've done that too. I know. It's a lot of work.
And how about hillsides? You and I have done a hillside in San Francisco with sheet mulch.
Yes, we have.
It depends on the angle of repose.
Yeah.
And you need to water it regularly.
Well, yeah, the angle of repose is the angle that soil will be stable and not just crumble and fall over. When you're doing hillsides, there's so much bad information out there. When you're doing a hillside, I'm gonna demonstrate. Here we go. I got my hillside right here. I need plants that root deep, and they're going to staple that soil in place. Then I need plants that root shallow, and their roots run around, and they're going to stabilize like all of this stuff. So I want plant roots that have a tendency to be fibrous and fine and real spready. And then I want other plants that root deep and help staple this whole system in place. If you have plants that are all the same on a slope, you're going to get all the same root zone, and that slope will be unstable at the point where those roots peter out. So having a mix of plants to hold that soil in place with this interconnected system of roots is the way to go. The challenge is finding out the information. So you can take some cues from how the plant is rooted into the pot from the nursery. It's kind of a weak clue, but it's better than nothing. You can Google rooting depth and that plant's scientific name, and you'll probably find some information. It's not an easy bit of information to find, because those roots will only go as deep as they're rewarded. So if you only ever water the first inch of the soil, you're going to have plant roots that behave very differently than if you're watering down to 2 feet or 3 feet. Imagine a carrot, like the kind you would eat, has the potential to send a root down 7 feet. So if that little guy can send down a taproot that goes 7 feet deep, then imagine if you were to water your plants super deeply on occasion and encourage that kind of depth from the ones that have that potential, you can really staple a slope in place. But that kind of thing would be like, part of your homework. Absolutely.
Well, and mulch can slide off cardboard.
Yep.
You may want to top with compost and get it good and wet, kind of glue it in there. So there's a lot of workarounds.
There's a website called Lawn to Garden, and I can't remember if it's a lawn2garden.org. I think it is. They have instructions, and that website is put out by the waste management folks I mentioned before.
And they're terrific. So
yeah,
it would be really easy for that to be its own topic as well.
Oh, totally. We could do that.
How about one on hardiness zones? Going back to zones just real quick. Our hardiness zones are often based on cold. Have you seen anything based on heat? And particularly since we're going into, we're getting more of that.
Yeah, we are going into way more of that. I have seen a system for that. I don't remember the name of it. The challenge is that then you have to connect the plant you're interested in with a system nobody's using right now. So there is a heat tolerance zone system that somebody made up somewhere, but finding out what your plant can take is part of that challenge. And that also is dependent on how much light it's getting, what time of the year it is, how hot are we talking, and is it also windy there? Because wind will pull more moisture out of a plant than heat will, all other things being equal. And so there's a lot of variables at play in how much heat a plant can tolerate. You may find that even in your own backyard, a plant, the same species, same cultivar, bought it on the same day from the same nursery plant. You get 6 of them, put 3 of them over here and 3 of them over there, and they're going to perform differently. So they'll have their own reactions to where they are on a really granular level. And that's going to be, no garden is ever just done. You don't like install it and go, ta-da, I'm finished, because it's constantly growing. It's constantly changing. Things are going to die. Other things are going to thrive. And you can keep editing and making decisions as you go.
Yeah. We are in a time where we have to start thinking about this.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But also you can improve your plant's resilience by encouraging it to root deeply. So if you're just watering your yard or whatever it is you've got 3 times a week to give it just enough, you're not doing that. You need to be watering it less times a week and more deeply, and encouraging those roots to go deep. So let's say this is my phone. Let's say I buy a plant, and here's my plant, and it comes out of a pot this big. So this is all the root zone it had to start with. If I put this in the ground, now it's in the ground, it still has roots that are only this much until you encourage them to, oh, look, roots, until you encourage them to grow out and to grow down and into the native soil. Once they get out in here, that's great, but you got to keep encouraging them to keep going and keep going. And so if I've just planted it yesterday, watering it 3 feet deep isn't going to help me very much. But if I planted it 3 months ago and I've watered it just a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper over 6 months or a year, now that plant can go water shopping from a hella large area and really pull in moisture when it needs it, rather than having to keep that little bitty space happy. So, I was just talking to my dad in Los Angeles about this 3 weeks ago. He waters his plants 3 times a week because those are the 3 days that are allowed. And I said, let's not do that. That's dumb. Let's scale it back. But you can't just go from 0 to 60 and expect it to grow roots tomorrow. So we want to scale it back so that he's making better use of fewer days and watering them more deeply, so that when a huge stress event like a big heat wave or something terrible comes along, that plant has a lot more to work with than if he just kept that little bit of soil wet 3 days a week and then it evaporates. So if the water hits the soil and evaporates without going through a plant, I did it wrong. I need to mulch that. I need to keep the water in the soil so that it's the way that it comes out is to be used by my plant, because I didn't pay for water to just evaporate. And with less and less water, we need to use it, not just let it evaporate. And so that's my little nutshell on that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a bunch of different questions. They are all over the place. Some of these we're going to go into deeper on future talks. We're going to have ones on soil. We're going to have ones on watering.
Yes.
Particularly for establishment.
Yes.
I think the best things you can do for a plant are to feed the soil.
Yes.
Beyond choosing the right ones, feed the soil, right, and make sure you're giving the water giving it the water it needs. So we'll go a lot deeper on those.
Yes.
With people who are very into that. So some of these questions we may not get to tonight, but there will be additional talks, and good. You'll all be getting information on all of those. But part of it, timing, choosing plants. In COVID and with the lockdown, a lot of us found plants to be kind of our comfort zone. There were many trips and there were many carloads of plants that occasionally happened, at least among the people who work in plants. But timing, we're in the middle of summer. We're halfway through the dry season for those areas that are very dry. Now's the time to be planning, to be killing off your lawn, to be finding what you want to do. But planting, timing, we're choosing plants, we're dreaming of plants. We're going to go get them in fall.
Okay, I'm going to use a really great example because this is what I've been obsessing over lately, is yarrow. I grow several different kinds in my garden. Now, right now, it's the days are about the longest that they get. They're just, I think we just passed the longest day. So they're getting shorter incrementally. So you think like right now it's hot season, it's summer, the days are longer, the air is warmer, it's drier. Now you would think is not the time to go buy plants, but if I really want to see what the yarrow look like when they're in bloom, this is my chance to go see them personally. And also it's my chance to, if I'm going to a retail nursery that isn't going to carry them when they're out of season, and some aren't so bad about that, but some really, I mean, if it's not blooming, they don't have it out on the shelf. So this is my chance to go see those. And if I want them, to buy them, but be aware that their root ball is so big. And so I want to keep it encouraged to grow. Here we go. Wait, roots to grow out of that pot. And most of that growth of the root system won't happen right now, like in the next month or two. But as that plant sits there and is cozy and comfy in the soil, and you're trying to help it get those roots established into the native soil, you can kind of coddle it a little bit, make sure it has enough water. And then as it goes into its less floriferous season over the winter and into spring and up into next summer, it will have been refocusing from flowers down into its roots in its less floriferous time, and it can start getting those roots going. So when these plants are dormant or not putting all their energy into other things, there is a lot that can be going on underground, especially if you're fostering and encouraging that. So that would be my spiel on that. There's a lot of like common advice that you only plant in the fall, or you only do this, or you only do that. I say no to the onlys. If I can find the plant and I like it and I have the bandwidth to take care of it and help it get established, I'm going to plant it when I see it and I can buy it. What I won't do in the heat of the summer is dig something up to transplant it. Now you definitely want to wait until it's not such a stressful time for transplanting plants that are already in your garden. Give them the chance to get through the summer before you go tearing stuff up.
So you can plant that, you can buy them now, but you're gonna have to baby them. You're not putting them necessarily in the ground under the hot sun in baked soil.
Or you may find that your nursery can place special orders and is more than happy to make sure that they have what you want in stock when you need it. I find that kind of service less common than it used to be because it's a lot of work on their part, and it just doesn't seem to be supported very much out there.
But if you ask the nurseries, then they know that people want this to happen.
Right. If you're inquiring about plants and they keep hearing, well, I want this plant, and they hear another customer comes and I says, I also want this plant, then they're going to start trying to source it because they want to sell it to you. I mean, they have absolutely no lack of desire to sell you stuff. So, you know, inquiring about it and asking and pestering them might help you get it in the off season, or go to another nursery, find another nursery, or find out when they can get it back in from the growers or their wholesalers or whoever.
Well, and we visit a lot of nurseries. It's one of the benefits of the job.
Huge.
But also it's really great if you can develop a relationship with your local nursery.
Yes.
And that's probably working with people who work at the nurseries, who know what grows well in your area and who can advise you on plants for that region is probably one of your best ways to really choose good plants.
Absolutely. I do that when I'm sourcing. I had a garden just north of me that I was working on. And when it came, we did all this planning. And then when it came time to actually buy the plants we had planned for weren't available in the quantity that we needed. So we had to swap out the plants that we'd done all the research on to find something else. And so we had established for this garden and for this plant order, we had established a relationship with a local plant, native California plant nursery. And so I called the guy that we were talking to and I said, okay, I understand you don't have this. what do you have that will be about the same size and not over this tall, because height was a big issue for our garden. And so rather than going back to the drawing board and searching all the books and searching all the lists and doing all that stuff, I just went to a guy who's an expert, knows what he has in the yard, knows what he has enough of to sell me, and said, what do you have that's going to work? Because here's our special circumstances. It faces this direction. It was on a slight slope, but it's got a lot of traffic and it's right next to the freeway. So there's a lot of heat and dryness and pollution that gets generated. What do you suggest? And he came up with a great suggestion. Then I went, when he gave me the suggestion, then I did a little homework and found out that I agreed with his suggestion, and totally just shorthanded the whole process by going to someone who knows what they have in the yard in the first place. And we needed the plants, within weeks. So I would do that, especially if you've already done all the homework. And rather than starting over, find out what's available and see if any of that will work for you.
Well, we're right at 6:30 and we appreciate all the time and the resources.
Yep.
This will be on the CNPS YouTube channel, and a link will be sent out to all attendees. And as well as you'll be hearing about future talks. We'll talk about water, we'll talk about soil. These 101 ones are meant to get, like this talk, a little bit nerdier, to go a little bit deeper. And we love the chance to talk about all these plant pieces.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for attending, and we will see you at next month.
Yay. Thank you.
So much. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, I'll see you later.